Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, we're going to talk about masking in On1 Photo RAW 2020, masking in general and luminosity mask specifically. And it really comes in handy in the effects module because there's different filters there. And by default, when you apply a filter, it's going to affect every single pixel in the image. But with masking, you could choose where that filter affects. And with luminosity mask, you could control what tones that filter affects. Now, this is a good example. In this scene, there was a lot of dynamic range. The sun was over here in the top left-hand corner, and as you can see, it's shining across the treetops. So the sky, the top of the trees are really bright, but the waterfall itself, the banks, really dark, and there's some dappled light down here. So this is a difficult scene to process. Now, I gave it a go in the develop module of On1 Photo RAW 2020, and I'll turn on my adjustments, and you can see that it's just not acceptable. So I did what I could over here, but it's still too dark, still too bright up here. But we could affect those specific tones in the effects module with masking. So we're going to jump over to the effects module, and I think I want to affect or try to adjust the darkest parts first. So I'm going to add a filter, and I'm going to go to a tone enhancer filter. Now, by default, when you open the filter, it's going to affect every pixel. So for example, if I turn exposure up or down, it's affecting everywhere. But I want to just adjust the darkest areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the little mask icon right here. So it turns on masking. And then what I want to do is I want to get a luminosity mask. So we're going to click on lumen. And when you do that, it applied the mask. Now you don't see it. Now if you want to view the mask, click on view. Now, when you do that, by default, you're probably going to get this red overlay. What I suggest you do is go up to Mask, down to View Mode, and turn on Grayscale. When you're doing masking, the grayscale will give you a better rendition of what actually is being adjusted as opposed to that red overlay. Now, what we want to do is we want to further refine this mask. Right now, it just looks like a black and white image. But what I want to do is I want to make some parts really dark, black even, and some parts really white. And I'm going to go to the levels sliders down here, and you can see levels has 3 separate sliders. What I'm going to do is the far left one, I'm going to move that to the right, and you can see I'm making the darker parts even darker when I do that. And I'm just going to keep moving that until I get all those shadows even dark. Now we're viewing the mask. We're not technically viewing the image. We're viewing the mask. And what this mask is telling us is that wherever there's light parts, that's what the tone enhancer is going to affect. Wherever it's dark, it's going to ignore that part. Well, I don't want that. I want it the opposite. I want it to affect where the dark areas are and not affect the light areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert the mask. Click on this button right here, and now you can see that the parts where dark are light and vice versa. So this mask, the way I have it set up now by moving the levels control, is going to allow the tone enhancer to only affect the darkest areas. So I'm going to turn view off by clicking on the view button. So we'll return back to our image. And now when I go down here and start adjusting things, it's only going to affect the darkest areas. So I could come in here and open up shadows. And even then I could probably bring highlights down a little bit. So that, not much, I don't need to do too much here. I just wanted to open up the shadows. And even now, just adding this one filter, you can see how it greatly improved the image. All right, now I want to just continue working on the image. I may use masking again. And since I already set up a mask for this scene, what I'm going to do before I leave the tone enhancer filter, I'm just going to copy the mask. And it just kind of copies it to the clipboard, so that we could use it down the line if I need to use it. So now what I think I want to do is add probably some color, more color to the image. So I'm going to go to Add Filter, and we'll go to Color Enhancer, and we'll open that up. And we don't need to do anything with a mask here. I'm just going to bring up saturation a little bit, I think. Then I think we'll do is we'll add filter, and we'll go to color adjustment. We'll go here. I think what we'll do is we'll go to orange, and we're going to make the oranges a bit brighter and maybe a little more saturation. And then we'll go to yellow, and same thing, we'll add a little saturation, make those a bit brighter. Then we'll go to green, and we'll make the greens a bit darker. So far, so good. All right, now I've done that. Now that waterfall itself, I want to affect just that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter, and I'm going to add a tone enhancer filter. Now again, when I add the tone enhancer filter, it's going to affect everywhere, right? Just like the last two filters we did, the color adjustment filter and the color enhancer filter affected everywhere because we didn't apply a mask. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the mask icon, and then I'm going to paste the mask, because remember I copied it from the first tone enhancer filter I put on. So I'm going to paste it so it's on there, and I'm going to view it. Now again, mask is kind of backwards of what I want, isn't it? I want to affect the waterfall. I don't want to affect anywhere else. So I'm going to invert this again. So I'll click on invert. Now the dark areas it's going to ignore, and it's going to adjust the white areas. But I really don't want it to affect the sky, and I don't really need it to affect the water down here. I just want to affect the waterfall. So what I'm going to do, by default, when you open up the mask icon, you're going to get a brush. And what I want to do is paint out the adjustment. You can see at the top in mode, paint out. We're going to have feather at 100 and opacity at 100. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the mask on. We're viewing the masks now. We're not viewing the image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm just going to paint. Now it's in paint out mode, so it's painting in black, because now the mask will not affect anywhere that I paint, right? So we'll come in here. Maybe I'll do that part of the waterfall there, but we want, or the water there, I should say. So we're doing basically the water and a little bit, the waterfall and a little bit of the water in front of it. So I'm going to turn the view off of the mask. So I'm going to click on the view button. So we're going to see the image again. Now we're still got that brush mode there because we're on the mask brush. Just click the Z button on your computer, Z for zebra, and you'll go back in view mode. So you don't have to have that brush flopping around. So we have the mask set up now, so whatever adjustments I do are only going to affect the waterfall. So I'm going to go down here to contrast, kind of move that around, add some contrast to that waterfall. Bring the highlights down just a touch maybe. So we're just doing some subtle adjustments to that waterfall. And it's, again, only affecting the waterfall because I used that luminosity mask I copied from the first tone enhancer filter and then modified it to fit what I want to do with this tone enhancer filter. All right, now I think I'm going to start finishing up the image. I'm going to go to add filter, and I'm going to go to dynamic contrast. And by default, it added some contrast to the image already. You can see there's before and there's after. Now I don't like what it did, so I'm going to manually come in and add my own amount of dynamic contrast the way I want it on this image. But with the dynamic contrast, you also have some tone adjustments as well. So what I'm going to do now, these tone adjustments are global. They're going to affect everywhere because I didn't apply a mask to this dynamic contrast filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I could touch up any of the, any of the tone with the tone adjustment, just to kind of finish it off. And I kind of like what I did there. We even add a little more vibrance. So there is before the dynamic contrast filter, and there's after the dynamic contrast filter. And maybe just have a little bit too much dynamic. Turn that down a little bit. But I think that's a good example of how to use masking in general in On1 Photo RAW 2020 and luminosity mask specifically. And you can see we took an image that really started out like this, and we added all that masking to process very specific parts of the image to end up with an image that looks like this. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.